Good evening. It is 5:30. We will go ahead and get the meeting started. The first order of business is to establish a quorum. We have a quorum of the board members present. I call this Medina Valley ISD special board meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. on August 14th, 2023. Absent, we have Veronica Cavazos. The next item on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, followed by a moment of silence if you'll join us. The next item on the agenda is public comment, and we have no one signed up to speak, so we will move on to the next item. The next item is closed session in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act under the exceptions noted in Texas Government Code Section 551.07, consultation with attorney, and Texas Government Code 551.074, personnel matters. The Board of Trustees will convene into a closed meeting now at 5:31 p.m. All voting or action will take place when the board and superintendent reconvene in the open meeting. Okay. Session at 6:44 p.m. The next item on the agenda is discussion and possible action items. Here, the second level 3 public complaint grievance by Hank C. Okay.
We're gonna need to connect with him.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's not joining. Do we not? Make sure we got it.
All right.
Go ahead and say something, Mr. C, so we make sure. Can y'all hear him okay?
I know there's a lot of echo.
Can you hear me, Mr. C? Okay. Shall we?
Yeah, see if you can just step out from the microphone a little bit.
A little bit? Okay. Is this any better? Okay. We can hear you. You want me just to proceed?
He's gonna need to be able to hear.
Right.
If you have a phone, we can do a phone connection as well. We could do a phone connection as well to clarify the audio for you. Right. Let's grab a phone. You hang on just a second, sir.
Mm-hmm.
You grab it?
Yes, sir.
precedent with respect to this matter. Each member of the board must decide whether he or she is able to serve as an impartial member for this grievance and arrive at a decision based solely upon information and documentation presented at this grievance presentation. Any member not able to act in such a manner may say so and ask to be excused. I now will ask each member to state their name and to affirm act impartially in hearing the grievance. Mr. Fillinger.
Nathan Fillinger, and I can act impartial.
Jason Bonney, and I can act impartial.
Generally Campbell, and I can.
Matt Castiglione, and I can act impartial.
Blaine Nash, and I can act impartial.
And I am Beth Zinsmeyer, and I can act impartial in this matter. In order to provide the most accurate record of this proceeding, an audio recording is being made. Please avoid talking when others are speaking so that the recording will reflect the proceedings accurately. The recording of what is presented here tonight, the board packet that was shared with the community member prior to the board meeting, including the district's policies, GF local, the agenda and the minutes for this meeting, once approved, will constitute the official record of this grievance. For the record, will the community member and then members of the administration present identify themselves by stating their name? Mr. C.
Yes, my name is Hank C., and I am the one following the level 3 grievance.
Scott Kalos, Superintendent, Medina Valley ISD.
These are the procedures for this hearing. First, the community member will make his presentation. When finished, the administration will be permitted to make a reply. This proceeding is a presentation, not a hearing where you question others. Neither side will question or cross-examine the other side. Within the specified timelines, the community member will make his presentation of what he wants the board to consider. The administration then will be given an opportunity to respond. While board members may ask questions of either party after both presentations are completed, the parties will not ask questions directly to one another. The community member and the administration are each allowed 15 minutes to complete their respective presentations. After the conclusion of both presentations, I will allow the community member and the administration 3 minutes each to provide a rebuttal statement. At the end of that time, board members may ask questions of either party. Will Board Member Generally Campbell please keep track of the time? After the community member and the administration have completed their presentations, board members, you may ask clarification questions of the parties. Board members, I request that you refrain from interrupting or asking your question until both sides have finished their presentations so that we can maintain an accurate record of the time used by each party. Are there any questions regarding the conduct of this hearing?
I have none.
Okay. Community member, you may now proceed with your presentation.
Hello, guys. Thank you for your time. I wanted to let y'all know a week ago I got an email from Lori Reed, and she told me that y'all were going to hold both of my grievances tonight, and I didn't want to do that. I thought that was improper because I hadn't fully, completely prepared for this grievance tonight that I'm talking to you about now. But in hindsight, I think it worked out actually really good, and I'll tell you why. I'm going to read some of your local GF policies here, and I'm going to say the same thing to Mr. Fillinger, Mr. Nash, and Mr. Bonney. I hope y'all are listening because y'all just got to witness my grievance in closed session, and I'm going to tell you, y'all, if y'all are paying attention, y'all will see that the rules that were violated just tonight alone in my closed session, you're going to see the rules that Mr. Wood and Mr. Kalos violated. So I'll start. I'd like to read the first thing out of GF Local, scheduling conferences. The district shall make reasonable attempts to schedule conferences at a mutually, keyword there is mutually agreeable time. If the individual fails to appear at the scheduled conference, the district may hold the conference and issue a decision in the individual's absence. That's the main reason I brought this grievance up. There's more, and I'll get into more here in a minute, but that was the main reason. Y'all wanted to move this grievance, and it wasn't mutually agreed upon. The reason y'all gave for this grievance not to be heard previously is because y'all's attorney was out of town. Well, that's not a good enough reason, guys. It interrupted my life and how I do things, and even from my preparedness for this this meeting here tonight. It wasn't mutually agreed upon. I actually sent y'all an email stated to both Scott Kalos and all the board members that I did not agree with moving this. I wanted it to be heard that night, and that many times in the last year and a half I've been at this school, Craig Wood or other attorneys from Washington Gallegos would call in. Considering that we pay them over $22,000 a month, almost every single month, I don't see a problem with why Mr. Wood couldn't find somebody to come in and take care of this issue. I'm going to read some other issues here. Stand by, please. This is under GF Local, and this is under the level 3 grievance policy. The superintendent or designee shall, again it says shall, provide the board the record of the level 2 appeal. Shall give the record of the level 2 appeal to the board members. And my grievance that I just filed with you guys, I specifically asked for my recording of my level 2 grievance to be heard and asked y'all to hear that level 2 grievance. Mr. Wood told me, he said that could happen, but I wouldn't be able to have my grievance tonight. That's false. That's not what this policy said. Y'all were allowed to look at y'all were allowed to look at the evidence tonight while we were in there in my executive session. This is according to your policy, guys. This is your policy that I'm pulling up off of your website. I have more. GF Legal. This is from GF Legal. A district shall take no action abridging the freedom of speech or the right of the people to petition the board for redress or grievances. That's from the U.S. Constitutional Amendment. That happens. The district that receives federal financial assistance directly or indirectly, and that the employs more than 15 personnel persons, shall adopt a grievance procedure that incorporates appropriate due process standards. Let me rephrase that. Appropriate due process procedures. Again, that was not done in my last grievance that I filed with y'all. Just heard 30 minutes ago. I didn't have due process. Matter of fact, I not only had due process, Terry Beck didn't have due process. Jeff Fisher didn't have due process. An appeal of the board's decision to the commissioner of the education shall be decided based on a review of the record developed at the district level. Records include a minimum, an audible, electronic recording, and written transcription of oral testimony and argument. Guys, there's several things that I just read to you from your local code that you just violated in the last grievance policy that I held with you 30 minutes ago. I want to talk to you about your grievance policy. This is for all the people listening. Again, this is not for me. This is for all the taxpayers out there. The policy is not set up for the taxpayers. The policy is supposed to be originally set up for teachers and taxpayers. But going through this process several times with you and through this with the school board, y'all have violated your own policies. You won't even follow your own grievance policies, which makes it impossible for any taxpayer to come to the table and address any grievance that we have with y'all. And that's what's happened with us. Even when we do get to the table, we're not allowed to present our evidence. We're not allowed to give witnesses during a grievance policy. This is insane. And I think this needs to be looked at. If y'all are truly there to represent the taxpayers, I want y'all to remember something. Y'all don't sit at that desk tonight where you're sitting. Those teachers don't get paid. Scott Kalos doesn't get paid. Craig Wood doesn't get paid. Y'all don't have a building to sit in unless the taxpayers give you money. And we've given you a lot of money, almost $376 million here this last month or so ago. You have a lot of money, but you're not following their policies. You're not letting the taxpayers air their grievances. Every time I try to come air a grievance with you, you'd either trespass me from the school, make it almost impossible for me to have any grievances. I've seen you throw Terry Beck out of a meeting for using the word interim when speaking of a superintendent. So y'all have some work to do here, guys. Now, Mr. Nash, Mr. Filsner, and Mr. Bonnie, I'm really talking to you guys because y'all are the new guys, and all my hope, all the hope of Medina County is resting on you guys right now. As far as this school, this $1 billion bond y'all just passed, I hope y'all guys do the right thing. I hope y'all start making changes to this policy. I hope you start making changes to the grievance. Y'all need to make changes to a lot of things, but this grievance policy needs to be addressed immediately because this is where you guys find out how your school is being run, what your teachers are doing, what your staff is doing. You get the taxpayers to come in and talk to you, and you get to find out how to operate the school. The school is being run on a lie right now. All your decision making that y'all are doing is being run on lies, sir. You're not getting input from the taxpayers. You're getting input from staff. You're getting input from somebody like Scott Kalos, who's being paid a lot of money to influence decisions. He has. He's done a really good job at that. But y'all need to open your eyes up and see the big picture here. You're talking about our kids' safety, our kids' future, and you're talking about our tax money. If you look at the tax assessment that just came upon all the people in this town for that bond, we got to eat that. We're going to have to pay for that tax assessment. But what we can do is make sure y'all are following your own policies. Make sure you're protecting our kids and doing the right things. And that's what I'm here for tonight. I want to make sure that y'all understand that most people in this community probably won't stand up and say anything because they saw what happened. They're seeing right now what's happening to myself. They saw what happened to Terry Beck. If you dare stand up and speak out against you guys, you will come at us and make up false charges. You will trespass us from the school. There's no number of things that y'all won't do to keep us fighting. And that's not fair. And that's what happened here. So, Mr. Fillinger, Mr. Bonnie, Mr. Fillinger, Mr. Bonnie, and Mr. Nash, guys, I hope y'all are listening. I hope the public's listening. And y'all need to make some serious changes here, guys. I don't really have much to add to this. Again, I'm not trying to make this personal. This was made personal on me. I came up and just aired some grievances and asked some questions. And the last year and a half, what y'all have done to me and Terry Beck and my family and my son is the most atrocious thing that you could do to a taxpayer. It's unforgiving and it's unbelievable. And I hope that everybody in the community starts to see this and they start standing up too. Because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take people to start standing up and letting y'all know you're there to represent us. You're not there to represent TASB. We don't even need TASB. You got the state legislature that gives you all the laws and rules that you're supposed to follow. So, guys, I hope y'all can affect some change because there definitely needs to be change here.
Okay, thank you, sir. The administration may now proceed with the reply.
So I have a copy of Mr. C's written complaint, and that copy was provided to all board members. Very little detail in this written complaint. Basically, all I can get out of it is where the complaint asked Mr. C to please describe the outcome or remedy you seek for this appeal. And here is his response to that question. You need to make this grievance process work for the taxpayers instead of the staff. This policy is unconstitutional and violates civil rights. I request you change this policy to better address taxpayers' concerns. So that's what I have in this written complaint. So that's what I will address right now, not all this other rhetoric that he brought up. And the bottom line is this policy is developed in connection with TASB, the Texas Association of School Boards. They help us develop all of our policy, as well as it is reviewed by our school district attorneys. And I think if you compare this policy to other school districts throughout the state, it will look very similar. So that's all I want to address with the policy. As far as making changes, that's the board's decision. But like I said, we go through TASB with all our policy and it is reviewed by our attorneys. Thank you.
Thank you. Community member, you may now proceed with your rebuttal, and you have 3 minutes.
Because guys, y'all just need to follow policies. Y'all didn't follow policies 30 minutes ago, and you haven't followed them now. And I got to say, why are we comparing ourselves to other schools, Mr. Kalos? That's just asinine and makes no sense to me whatsoever, sir. Just because somebody else is operating in a poor manner and doesn't do things the right way doesn't mean we should do that here at Medina Valley ISD. I've identified the policies that you have not followed. I just identified the policies that you didn't follow this evening, less than 30 minutes ago, and you're sitting here comparing Medina Valley to other schools. How about just answer the questions and the things that I'm bringing up and deal with the issues I'm bringing forward? You're not doing that. You're skating around all the issues, and I hope the people who are watching this understand that. It's ridiculous, sir, what you're doing. again, I will say Tasby, Tasby's giving y'all bad information. It's not Tasby, we're paying, how much do we pay Tasby? Tens of thousands of dollars a year for what, Mr. Kayla? To get bad advice like you're giving right now? Really, that's just unsettling to me, to be honest with you. It's very unsettling. And this just goes to show everybody who's watching this, this is how your tax dollars are being spent. And this is the representation you get from your expenditures of your tax dollars. You get bad advice, poor legal advice, and you get school board members and you get a superintendent who can't even follow their own policy. That's where we're at. And that's what this meeting was about tonight, sir. Follow your policy.
Mr. C,
Again, you didn't even follow the policy that you had less than 30 minutes ago.
Mr. C, if you keep your comments to the policy and not to any personnel, please.
I didn't hear you.
Could you all repeat that?
Yeah.
Mr. Wood Mr. Wood asked that if you would, that was Mr. Wood, and he asked if you would please keep your comments to the policy that you're grieving and not to personnel, as I had mentioned earlier.
Ma'am, I understand what you're saying, but when your personnel violates the policy, I tie the two together, ma'am. The policy can't be broken without the personnel breaking the policy.
That's
That's
not part of this.
That's not part of the grievance. The grievance is against the policy, not employees of the district.
Ma'am, your district is following, I can't believe you're saying that. Your district is violating your policy. The policy doesn't violate itself. It takes the member to violate your policies, and that's why your name came up. I have to tie the violation to a member's name. Why? I mean, I don't understand what's so hard to understand about this.
Madam President, the grievance.
Mr. Wood violated the policy too. and he stated
Sir,
that-
Mr. C, your grievance is against the policy.
You're interrupting me.
You were warned that if you have made any complaints about employees of the district, this will go into closed session and not be an open session. Okay, thank you.
The grievance is about the policy and a claim that the policy is unconstitutional. It is not about alleged violations of policy.
Well, guys, y'all can say this however you want to say it. I believe the people who are going to watch
Okay.
this.
Sir, your time is up. It is now time for the administration to proceed with a rebuttal.
You interrupted me during my 3 minutes, so can I please have my full 3 minutes? Because Mr. Wood interrupted me and you interrupted me. You didn't let me finish.
Sir, your comments were not regarding the grievance, which was against the policy.
Well, listen, so I'm glad y'all are doing this anyway. Everybody's going to get to see it. Thank you.
The administration may now proceed with the rebuttal, and you have 3 minutes as well.
I have no reply. I don't feel like there's anything I need to reply to.
Thank you. Any board member who wishes now may question the parties for clarification of any fact, issue, or request for relief. Does anyone have any questions?
I would love to take a question, please.
Seems no one has a question, so thank you. This concludes the appeal presentation involving the grievance filed by the community member. With respect to the grievance, the board may vote to grant the appeal, which means that we believe the complaint is valid and that the community member should be granted the relief requested. Alternatively, the board may vote to deny the level 3 grievance, which means that we believe the community member should be denied the relief requested of this board. As another alternative, we can vote to grant in part and deny in part any or all of the level 3 community members' complaint or requested remedies. Throughout the decision-making process, the board will consider only the community member's complaint presentation and administrative response presented tonight at this meeting, as well as the documents and the records presented to us. At this time, I'm going to ask the board members and Mr. Wood to step into closed session pursuant to section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code, so that the board may ask Mr. Wood any questions they may have about any legal issues involving the grievance. We will return into open session to deliberate on the grievance and to make our decision. The time is now 7:15 PM. Okay, we are back, and the board is reconvening into open session at 7:34 PM. Continued discussion and action items. The next item on the agenda, consider the first level 3 public complaint grievance filed by Mr. Hank C. Board members, do you have any questions or want further discussion? No? Okay. Not hearing any, I will entertain a motion.
I, Blaine Nash, move to deny the level 3 grievance of Hank C. And I further move that the board deny the requested remedies.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I, Generally Campbell, second the motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. All board members voted for, and the motion carries. The next item on the agenda is consider the second level 3 public grievance complaint by Hank C. Board members, do you have any questions or want further discussion? I'm not hearing any. At this time, I'll entertain a motion.
I, Nathan Fillinger, move to deny the level 3 grievance of Hank C. And I further move that the board deny the requested remedies.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I, Jason Bonnie, second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. All board members voted for, and the motion carries. Thank you very much. We will move on to the next item on the agenda. Consider the amended 2023-2024 compensation plan. Mr. Zamora.
Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Kalos. So we had, after reviewing our compensation plan that the board had approved previously, we came across a couple items that we wanted to request to make changes to or add. The first item is the inclusion stipend for inclusion teachers. We found that this is a growing trend as far as giving a stipend not only to behavior or ALE, but to our inclusion staff. So we wanted to make that recommendation. The other request is a couple of job title changes and changes in pay grade. We have a few specialist positions that we're changing from specialists to coordinators. It will be a change in pay grade from pay grade 2 to pay grade 3. And then additional duty stipends. So we have a couple of lead drivers in the transportation department. They are our drivers that go out on routes with our new drivers, give them training, help us support for absenteeism. They learn the different routes of the district so that they can fill in as substitutes. And so these lead drivers historically have received additional compensation to their hourly rate. And so we're asking for that same increase.
Does anyone have any questions on that? Okay.
Thank you.
Baked into the budget
Yes,
for,
these,
already on the forecasted ones?
yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Want to move on to the next? Oh, was that all three of them? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I was waiting for.
That's all
Oh,
compensation.
perfect. I missed one. I missed that. Okay, great. Well, if there are no other questions, I'll look for a motion. I apologize.
I, Matt Castiglione, move to approve the amended 2023-2024 compensation plan as presented.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
No,
Oh,
Uh,
sorry.
I, Jason Bonnie, second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. All board members voted for, and the motion carries. The next item is consider the TASB Risk Fund General Liability Insurance Agreement. Mr. Zamora.
So this is our insurance to cover all our general liability, our structures, our automotive, our professional liability for staff. We were with TASB last year. We are renewing with them. Just a little information. So we transitioned to TASB a year ago from our previous provider who had been with the district many years. When their proposal came in, we had gone out to get a quote from TASB as well. At that time, the previous vendor was significantly over the proposal from TASB. This year, even though the renewal is large, it still came in under the previous proposal a year ago from the previous provider. So we're still paying less today than we would have if we stayed with the previous provider.
Okay, are there any questions? Okay, if there's no questions, I'll look for a motion.
I, Generally Campbell, move to approve the agreement with the TASB Risk Fund for General Liability Insurance as presented.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
Jason? Okay.
I,
Sorry.
Jason Bonnie, second the motion.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. All board members voted for, and the motion carries. We'll move on to the next item. Consider the TASB Risk Fund Workers' Compensation Agreement with Mr. Zamora.
So again, in review of our insurances, currently we have our workers' comp. It is a self-funded program. We've had this program for a while, but in review with TASB, getting a quote from them, we were able to bring down our costs about $200,000 from what we were expensing with our self-funded program. It does provide us a little more assurance of risk. There's less risk as we're moving to a fully funded program and moving away from a self-funded program. And so as the district grows with the additional staffing every year, just felt it was a good time to make that adjustment as well as save the district some money on the budget side.
What's the difference that we're looking at?
In savings,
Savings.
it's about $200,000.
If there are none, I'll look for a motion.
I, Nathan Fillinger, move to approve the agreement with TASB Risk Fund for Workers' Compensation as presented.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I, Blaine Nash, second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All board members voted for, and the motion carries. The next item on the agenda is consider the construction procurement method for the Medina Valley Middle School traffic improvements and delegate authority to the superintendent to proceed with procurement. Mr. Zamora.
As part of our process for construction projects, we are required to bring to the board our procurement method. For this project, we are requesting or recommending the competitive sealed proposal process. As we know previously, we've gone out with CMAR for the high school due to time constraints. This project we feel is better suited for this procurement method type.
Any questions? Then I'll look for a motion.
I'm Matt Castiglione, move to approve the competitive sealed proposal as a construction procurement method for Medina Valley Middle School traffic improvements and delegate authority to the superintendent to proceed with procurement as presented.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I, Jason Bonnie, second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. All board members voted for and the motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Zamora. The next item on the agenda is the budget workshop. Dr. Kalos.
Yes, ma'am. So Mr. Zamora and his staff have been working very hard over the past few months, preparing our budget for next year, next school year, 23-24. We've presented a few updates to y'all as he's been working through this. He wants to, again, present the most recent update, as well as show you when we come back on August 28th, show you what it'll look like as far as what the board will have to approve that night or consider for approval that night. And then also talk a little bit about tax rate.
Yes, sir. That is correct. So again, just part of the process, because we didn't have salary and compensation built into the budget from a standpoint of actuals, we were always estimating what that cost was. And so after the compensation plan, staff worked on getting all that information in and then putting it into the budget so we'd have a better picture of where our budget stood. Going on to the first slide, the other thing that happened this last week was we were able to finalize what our tax rate is going to be set at. Again, as part of legislation, we are required to compress based on their formulas. And so you can see that we have a substantial compression on our M&O side. You can see us going from 0.8546 to 0.6692, almost a 19-cent reduction. On the INS side, of course, we are increasing that to help for the bond that we just passed and sold, moving that from 0.47219 to 0.50, an increase of 0.02781. Our total tax rate last year was $1.32679, and you can see for next year, our total tax rate is 1.1692 for a total decrease of 15 cents or 0.15759 cents, almost 16-cent decrease. Going on to the next slide.
Mr. Zamora, and that is with new legislation.
That is with new
calculated into that.
legislation, correct. So here's our budget, taking a look at it again, how it's been previously presented. And that's because we presented it in object. So salaries is our 6,100, 6,200s, et cetera. We presented it that way because part of the process on waiting for compensation is we don't know how much our salaries are in each function, which we'll get to in a little bit. So this is similar to how we presented it since the start. You can see that our total budget revenue-wise for next year is $85,750,517. You can see our appropriations or expenditures is $85,196,881. We do show a surplus of a little over $500,000. You can see the growth between last year and next year is pretty substantial. Again, a lot of that has to do with the expected growth of the district, as well as us falling into the tier 2 category of the fast growth allotment, which increase our funding. If we go to the next slide. So this is a look at just the general fund, and this is by the functional area. So this is the way we will request the board to adopt the budget by the function. And again, I'm just showing a picture of the growth between the functions based on last year to next year. Again, the totals are the same. Total revenues are the same, expenditures and surplus. Go to the next slide. So the food service and the debt service are the two other funds that the board approved during this process. This slide is a picture of our food service. And so you can see that we expect a growth of a little over $800,000, almost $900,000 on our revenue, taking us up to about $5.9 million. On the appropriation side, you can see that the appropriation or expenditure is at $6.5 million. The reason for that is because as part of the process, the prior year, the Texas Department of Ag has a requirement that we can carry a maximum fund balance. And so we exceeded that last year. A lot of that had to do with the COVID funding, feeding 100% for free under the free and reduced program. Really pushed our revenues up. And so now we're in a position that we need to spend down some of our fund balance. And we did bring a budget amendment to the board earlier in the year talking about this. So we continue to try to spend down that fund balance. If you look at current year, even though the current year, and that is a look at our budget, not our expected revenues or expenditures, it shows a small deficit. We will not have a deficit this year. We will have another pretty substantial surplus by the end of the fiscal year. And so we will come back to the board again, trying to spend down any excess fund balance that we have based on the 22-23 fiscal year. But for now, we're planning on next year with the additional surplus from the prior year. Again, we'll come back to the board at some point. Next slide.
Mr. Zamora, just
Yes,
real
ma'am. Yes,
quick.
ma'am.
So we don't actually have, although it shows a budget deficit, we're really not in a budget deficit. Explain again the
Yes.
reasoning why that looks like we're in it, but we're not.
So for the 22-23 column, that is taking a picture of our budget. That is not a picture of our actual. I wanted to compare budget to budget versus actual to budget, just so we could see the growth between fiscal years. At the end of this fiscal year, the 22-23 fiscal year, our revenues will be, our expenditures will be much less than what is there, because again, when we brought that budget amendment to try to spend down some of that surplus, we haven't met that goal. We didn't get to spend all of it. And so that's going to leave, again, quite a substantial fund balance going into next year.
So for 22-23, what made the difference? Was it our expenditures, our appropriations aren't going to be as much as we thought they were going to be initially?
Well, correct. So our overall budget was less than we expected, but even when we came to the board to increase the overall budget to try to spend down the fund balance, we weren't able to spend it all.
Yeah.
And so it's going to carry into next year as far as some of the items that we had earmarked for. We just didn't achieve them this year.
Yeah. So our fund balance exceeded what Texas Department of Ag says it can be. We have to spend it down, and the only way to do that is to have a deficit budget for that current year.
Correct.
And make up for that with our general fund balance, or our food service fund balance in this case.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you spend down your fund balance, it's creating more expenses, right? Your expenses go up, but your revenues do not go up.
Correct.
Makes it look like a deficit, but it really isn't.
Yeah. Our day-to-day operational budget is healthy and is in a surplus position.
Do we anticipate hitting the spend this year?
We anticipate hitting the spend from the prior year expectation of being compliant. Again, when we close the books this year, TDA will take a look at our audit and say, your fund balance went up again. And there is a formula they use to determine if we exceed the maximum fund balance allowed. And then once they get that number, they'll give us notice that we have about a year to spend it down. All right, next slide. So this is our debt service fund. So this is where we pay our bonds, interest and principal, and of course, any fees associated with servicing of the bonds. Again, you can see the substantial growth between last year's budget, which is the 22-23 column, to next year's budget. You can see that we do have a balanced budget. During the workshop, we did show a small surplus of about $11,000 because the hold harmless number is still a moving target. And of course, tax collections is as well. I went ahead and balanced the budget out instead of carrying such a small surplus. But you can see that our fund balance expectation for next year is going to be slightly bigger than that. But we should have at least a $5.6 million fund balance going into next year.
So the hold harmless that you mentioned from the state, is that related to the changes in legislature that are coming through? I mean, what is their hold harmless, excuse me?
So that hold harmless estimate is based on prior year changes in the homestead. So yeah, so that number is based on those estimations. We'll be back to adjust the revenues between local revenues and state revenues if the $100,000 exemption passes in November, which we all know it probably will. But we'll make that adjustment at that time.
Does the 23-24 budget, does that include the new tax rates that you showed earlier?
Yes, it does.
It does. So that shows this is with the compressed tax rate, not on this one. This is at the 50 cents that we need for the debt service on our new bond, but on the other ones that included the compressed tax rate.
Yeah, so on the on the general fund side, if we want to go back to that slide, Lori. Yes, on this slide, I do apologize. I don't recall if I made that adjustment yet to this as well. I think I'm holding off till November as well.
Okay, that would take place when that tax collection or that new tax rate would take place would start when?
I'm sorry, tax rate, yes, it does take into consideration tax rate. It
Okay.
doesn't take into consideration homestead. I'm sorry.
Okay.
When are appraisals certified?
Certified appraisals were in July. So those have to happen by law by July 25th. Again, there are still ARBs being held in both counties. So those numbers will change. Again, we allowed for a 4% variance between preliminary and I could say January date is about what I've trended out previously. And so we've already taken into account some losses at that rate.
You mentioned earlier that we did hit the tier 2 on the fast growth district funding.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we were tier
3 at first.
before, so
Yes, sir.
so we did get that, which increases our funding from the state, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. All right, let's go back to that slide right there. So this is how the budget will be presented to the board on the 28th. So you have your three funds, your general fund, your national school breakfast lunch fund, and then your debt service fund. It'll be same numbers. Nothing will change between now and then. It's just the format of it. So we'll show a projected fund balance like we do there for each fund. And then that will be it. Next slide, Laura. So as we mentioned at the Finance Committee and the board members that have been on the board, this is a requirement of the district back in the 2019 legislation before they changed our funding and the way they calculated funding on property values. It used to be that the property values used for funding was a year behind. They changed that again in 2019. This criteria was created that same year before legislation passed as part of our first report. For one reason or another, TA still wanted to keep it around as a requirement. So I am simply meeting that compliance piece and showing it to the board and discussing property lag, which doesn't exist anymore. So unless there's questions, we'll move on to the next slide. And that is the end of the presentation.
Do we have a projection on the homestead increase? What impacts on it?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, the appraisal districts did provide a estimate on what that homestead means to the districts.
Okay. And we've already got that.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So if that passes in November, when would that become when that new homestead exemption take place? Would it take place for the tax collection for that
Correct.
year?
Yes, sir.
would.
So tax statements usually don't go out to the end of November, maybe
Correct.
December. So the tax assessor collector's office will have, I'm sure, that ready to run it one way or the other and send out statements. But it will
Okay.
go into effect for this cycle.
Is there an indication that the state will have a hold harmless related to that as well?
Yes, we are guaranteed to be held harmless with the passing of our bond and sale of the bond.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
All righty, thank you all.
Which leads us to the next item on the agenda, and that's adjournment. Who would like to make the motion?
Monic's not here, so I'll do it. I, Matt Castiglione, move to adjourn the special board meeting at
7:59.
7:59 PM on August 14th, 2023.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I, Nathan Fillinger, second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Seeing how fast you guys could do that. Okay, all board members voted for, and the motion carries. We are adjourned. And thank you all for visiting this evening.